Oh, hey, didn't see you there, because YouTube law dictates that every video covering Banjo-Kazooie has to start like this. Banjo and Kazooie in Smash. Well damn, to say about time would be underselling it. It's a pretty fascinating case, honestly, because conversations regarding the bear and bird duo can rarely happen nowadays without bringing up... Ha! Rare. Banjo-Kazooie, what a damn good game, but you've heard this all endlessly by now. It was almost as if for a while, if you wanted to get into the whole video game review thing, a pretty cliche way to get your foot into the door would be to cover this game specifically. And I would know. Listen, alright? I was a very different dude back then. Banjo's Smash reveal sparked something different in me. I wanted to finally experience everything that this franchise had to offer, from its debut to what led us to this very moment. And to do so, I was about to do something pretty drastic, and I did it. I bought an Xbox! Yeah, I'm actually part of the small percentage of the population out there who has never owned a single Xbox console. I've always been totally content with just Nintendo and PlayStation. But hey, I found an original Xbox One and Rare Replay combo for $100 on eBay. I've certainly spent money on much worse. Playing Banjo-Kazooie on the N64 is still fine and dandy, don't get me wrong, but I just had to see what I've been missing out on with the Xbox Live versions for all these years. It runs at a higher resolution, that's the big one. The life icon doesn't really look as good. I don't know, man, that always irked me. All of the Nintendo references were removed and replaced, and you know, that one makes sense. Banjo does still rock a classic Game Boy on the load menu though, which is pretty cool. You know, it probably would have been a bit too much work to outright change the model with something else, and besides, the only equivalent device that would have made sense would have been to give Banjo a Zune, and that makes me uncomfortable. And hey, can't forget about this, my very first ever achievements. How exciting. Well, hot damn, that's $100 well spent. But oh, if it's Banjo's debut we're gonna talk about, Banjo-Kazooie isn't the game to go over, of course not. It's Diddy Kong Racing! Often a forgotten part of Banjo's past, Diddy Kong Racing is actually the first sighting of the bear, just with no bird in sight. He was simply one of the playable racers and nothing more, so it's mostly just a neat little factoid. It was an appearance that lacked much impact. But you slap a bird on him, you wait a year, compose and animate an iconic musical number to start off a brand new adventure, and well, the rest is history. So the plan here is to take a look at what made this game so good, and then take a look at the highs and lows that followed soon thereafter. People lost their minds seeing Banjo and Kazooie show up in Smash Brothers. Surely there has to be a reason why, and finding that reason out starts now. It's Banjo time! Straight out of the gate, Banjo-Kazooie just oozes charm. The load file screen is fantastic, which is a sentence that you don't really hear very often. Banjo just chilling out around his house, getting a bit of cooking done. The music is different when hovering over each file. It's minor, but it really does set the tone for the rest of the game. The story is super simplistic as well, but enough to get you out of the house and ready to go. The evil witch Gruntilda can't stand that her talking pot basically called her ugly. The prettiest in town is this little bear girl, Tootie, Banjo's sister. And in an absolute rage, she sets off to do something about it. Any day now. Oh, okay, there she goes. Grunty then manages to kidnap Tootie, and Banjo somehow slept through the entire thing that was going on outside, despite Kazooie losing her mind right next to him. Man, he was hibernating just then. And once we get all of the info from our friendly neighborhood bottles, we set off on an adventure to save our sister. And we gotta get her back super soon, or else Grunty will steal all of her prettiness. That's a damn impressive machine, to be honest. Props to her. Sure, it's a pretty nothing plot, and at the end of the day, you are still saving the girl, but it gets the job done. It has a good fairy tale vibe to it. And just like that, we're already at one of the coolest parts of the game. At this point, Bottles offers you the tutorial section, where you get to run around the awesome starting area, Spiral Mountain, and get used to the different mechanics available to you. And you're not allowed to move on until he gives you each individual move. Or you can just press the B button, get everything immediately, and get going. The entire tutorial is optional. Being able to start properly playing the game almost immediately is really satisfying, and something that modern games still sometimes have troubles with. You do still deal with tutorials from Bottles introducing brand new moves to your arsenal throughout the different levels, but the banter back and forth is actually super endearing. Kazooie and Bottles call each other names on a constant basis, while Banjo is the straight man and just wants to get things done. This makes the encounters a lot more enjoyable. Right in their very first ever interaction, Bottles calls Kazooie strange looking, and she immediately hits him back with Goggle Boy. Oh man, how vicious. And then we have Grunty's lair, found by entering her massive head sculpted onto a mountainside. I'm sensing a bit of a pattern here with these big head mountains in rare games. The lair is Banjo-Kazooie's hub world, and man, it is one of my favorites. There's a surprising amount of variety to the landscapes found within, and the further you progress, you notice that it's always slowly transitioning into the themes of the worlds that you're about to jump into, with new enemies and obstacles creeping in, and the lair's music remixing on a level-by-level basis. And the entire time, Gruntilda will regularly chime in with insults in rhyme form, just the right amount of annoying to make it compelling to take her down. Even her sister Brentilda is rooting for you as well. She pops up around the lair to help you out for your inevitable final battle. And alright, this part's not the best, but I'll get to that. And we've only just scratched the surface about what makes this game cool. The optional tutorials, the hub world, the loading screen. Yeah, Banjo-Kazooie does a lot of cool and unique things, but things like that, they kind of get overshadowed by the fantastic gameplay. Alright, now let's talk about the fantastic gameplay. By modern standards of the word collectathon, Banjo is actually pretty by the books. Each of the game's 9 worlds are laid out in a pretty similar fashion. 10 jigsaw pieces, known as Jiggies, the main collectible, are spread throughout each, and are rewarded for fulfilling requests by the world's NPCs, or by completing gameplay challenges like finding the 5 hidden Jinjos. Oh wait, I'm sorry, I forgot the quotations. Hidden. Like literally, you're like literally a brisk walk away to safety. What are you, are your legs broken? Alright, sure, whatever. For the instant satisfaction of a cheery jingle, I'll do whatever's asked of me. You also gain access to a constantly growing moveset, adding a ton of versatility to the play control. Extra movement options like the Talon Trot, which is gonna be how you spend 95% of the game playing. New items like different types of shoes to traverse poisonous areas or move faster. Being able to fly or turn invincible thanks to finding these colored feathers. And new attacks like Kazooie being able to shoot eggs from her mouth and her... Oh... But even in this fairly standard gameplay style, something that we're already pretty used to seeing with games like Mario, Spyro, more modern attempts like A Hat in Time, Banjo still excels due to personality being at the forefront of everything you do without needing to sacrifice fun gameplay. Each of the levels has a very distinct theme, with characters and missions fitting them to a T, like a giant snowman and living Christmas tree lights on the verge of death in Freeze Easy Peak, to the dreary Bubble Gloop Swamp being filled with appropriate swamp life, both evil and good. There are so many moving parts too, you actually have an impact on these worlds and the lives of the characters that you interact with. For example, in Gobi's Valley, you save Gobi from imprisonment, who then goes to find some shade under this chunky tree Trunker, and after just a little bit more animal abuse, not too much, the water from Gobi's hump quenches the tree's thirst, and then he leaves to find safety in a later level, Click Clock Wood, where you abuse him just a little bit more, man. Gobi can't catch a break, but I gotta get these jigsaw pieces. Cheeto is a bit of an underappreciated character as well. Hidden deep within parts of the lair, you can find Grunty's old magic spell book, where he rewards you with some cheat codes that can double your limits for your eggs and feathers, which you then input inside of a sandcastle in Treasure Trove Cove. There's no simple menu here, you gotta slam Kazooie into the ground for each individual letter. Oh man, there's a lot of animal abuse in this game. It does take way longer than a menu just for the sake of being unique, but I still love it. There are even some hidden cheat codes that you can access by completing a secret puzzle minigame in Banjo's house that, oh my. Yes, finally, washing machine Banjo, brilliant, watch out world, here comes some freshly cleaned tidy-whities. And Mumbo Jumbo, man, you can't forget about this guy. In most of the levels, you can find Mumbo in one of his huts, and if you collected enough of his Mumbo tokens, he's able to transform Banjo into a brand new form, with a unique set of abilities to complete a few more challenges. The thing is though, this doesn't happen in every level, and more times than not, they end up having multiple uses, so it ends up not feeling like a tacked on gimmick that you just expect to happen every single time you enter a new stage. And if anything, it just adds to the game's charm and world building. These are more than mere stages, they're living, breathing worlds with plenty to do and see, and the music gets this across too, because every area comes with a bright and cheery beat to accompany the colorful landscapes, but it's also a dynamic soundtrack since it changes slightly depending on where you're located, like a muffled sound when you're underwater or in a cave. The composer, Grant Kirkhope, is amazing, he made one of the best soundtracks of all time, etc, etc, I love him. Moving on, we've heard this a million times already. And in terms of the level's designs, they're also tight and concentrated, making it a breeze to navigate and constantly get your hands on some collectibles. The more minor items, the 100 music notes, are sprinkled about the areas in such a way that if you're going for all of them, you're guaranteed to see every single thing a level has to offer. The jigsaw pieces are a brilliant collectible as well because they're more than just a simple number used to unlock a new area, they're tangible objects that are used throughout Grunty's lair to fill out incomplete puzzles that reveal the next stage. That's a really cool use for them, and I always like that more than Mario 64 being like, oh, the stars have magic and you need just about that much magic and now go fight the turtle. They also do a little bit of a dance every time you get one and it's consistently like the greatest thing ever. That's beautiful. That's a 10 out of 10 game right here. I guess if anything could be said as a negative here, it's maybe that the levels do feel a bit too self-contained at times. Like there are a few moments when elements of levels leak into the hub world or other levels, like some sections of the layer being accessible with Mumbo's transformations and the aforementioned animal abuse, but typically a level has its own identity that stays there, and that's it. You're also able to knock out most of the levels in one go, only on the rarest of instances being asked to return after getting a new ability. A lot of the best elements about this game aren't exclusive to Banjo-Kazooie, it's just that everything coming together in such a fantastic way is why Banjo-Kazooie is held to such a high standard. You know, it never feels repetitive, the worlds are so full of personality and life, you're constantly encouraged to explore while also being correctly funneled down the correct pathways. It nails everything so damn well, I would argue, perfectly. There is that one propeller jiggy that you go for in Rusty Bucket Bay. That one really sucks, but you know, aside from that, the development team totally nailed their first full go at a 3D platformer. For all of the reasons stated above, that is why Banjo-Kazooie is such a damn fine game all of these years later. Which is all the more reason why the end of the game is very upsetting. Damn, the end of this game kinda sucks. I'm sorry. Once you're ready to tackle Gruntilda, it's time for the Furnace of Fun board game. It's a super cute and novel idea on paper, but it's the part of the game that I dread the most. Each spot on this board is a different style of challenge, which that alone is totally fine until you land on a grunty space, and then everything gets ruined. When you land on one, you get asked a personal question regarding how Gruntilda lives her life. And you remember Brentilda? Well, she gives you the answers to these questions, and on every playthrough, those answers are random. So you either need to really pay attention and write those answers down, or just blindly guess. And if you die, well, hey, just start it all over. That's awesome. I love the idea, but those grunty spaces really ruin the entire thing. If I was able to skip this without doing some sort of speedrun exploit, that would make this so much more bearable. Ha. Bearable. It does at the very least wrap up in a great way though. Once you make it to the end, Grunty escapes up a stairway, Tootie is saved, we're treated to a mock credit sequence, again, more similarities, and we get a cute little vacation scene that also reminds Banjo that hey, you big dumb idiot, you still didn't defeat Grunty, haha, and then you get to make your way to the final part of the lair. You get access to a few extra goodies if you collected enough music notes, and with the help of her dingpot who totally betrayed her, we can finally confront Gruntilda in a pretty great boss fight. The key to a good final boss, in my opinion, is one that properly tests every single one of the skills that you've learned on the adventure leading up to it, and this absolutely does that. After some solid hits, it's time to summon the help of the Jinjos. Oh what, you didn't expect these cute little incompetent creatures to come together and form the almighty Jinjonator? Well, of course, it's only the most logical conclusion. They beat the crap out of Grunty, knock her right off the roof of the lair, and she falls all the way down to Spiral Mountain, and she dies. Like literally, a giant rock falls on top of her and her assistant can't free her and she's suffocating, she dies. She legitimately dies. Well damn, that's pretty morbid. Oh man, would you look at those melons. Finally, after that grand battle, the day is saved. Banjo, Kazooie, and company can enjoy some rest and relaxation. And then Mumbo does something pretty neat. He shows off secrets from the levels that we've been visiting, but they end up tying into the sequel, Banjo-Tooie. This is where that mythical stop and swap idea comes into play, but I think I'll save that for next time. Actually though, in the Xbox version, they start mentioning nuts and bolts instead of Tooie, and I don't know how to feel about that. Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts make Banjo-Kazooie look like a joke. Oops. A series of somewhat weak final moments can't make Banjo-Kazooie any less of a fantastic adventure that still, all of these years later, remains in the upper echelon of 3D platformers. It's not just a good game on the Nintendo 64, it's a collectathon that helped start the trend of collectathons being a thing. Everyone at the time wanted to copy what Banjo-Kazooie did so well. Everything came together beautifully to make an unforgettable game that, in my opinion, put the Red Plumber to shame back in the day. It does have somewhat of an interesting history as well. Rare Replay has this really cool behind-the-scenes look at Banjo-Kazooie's development on how it started off as an RPG for the Super Nintendo, and then it moved on to the N64, and then we got sort of a side-scrolling thing here that uses the bear that we know now, to eventually getting to see the game that became an ultimate classic. They also just straight up show the beta Jiggy Get animation. This short documentary is a really entertaining watch that comes highly recommended as well. And you know, now that I finally have access to Rare Replay, I can check out the rest of Rare's lineup. All of these years later, I've only played a couple of their games, but there's 30 in here. It's quite the varied lineup as well. Okay, so the first one on this list is Attic Attack. It's an old computer game, I guess. Yeah, sure, why not? Let's just say that Rare had humble beginnings. 3D platformers are one of, if not my favorite, gaming genre. Exploring huge, colorful worlds, just collecting whatever the story tells you to collect, and having a lot of fine-tuned control of your character while doing so? Oh, it's pretty awesome. And the Nintendo 64 is known for having some of the best of the best. Banjo-Kazooie, Rayman 2, Conker's Bad Fur Day, if you even want to call that one a platformer. And of course, Super Mario 64, the game that kickstarted the whole third dimension revolution. And that's all fine and good, but when you really dive deep into a console's library and you look for platformers, you see that there are a ton of games that make you wonder, do people even know that these games exist? So I have taken it upon myself to play through some hidden, I don't want to say gems necessarily, but definitely hidden platformers that you may or may not have heard of, but people certainly don't talk about. It doesn't really help that when it comes to the Virtual Console, what it is and what it was, a lot of the options that I have here, is just not happening. These games are lost in time. So I've went ahead and pulled out 3 N64 games that I really couldn't see myself making a solo dedicated episode on, and I think you'll see why in just a bit, but let's get this adventure started, shall we? First off, we got Chameleon Twist. And boy, what a relic of its era this one is. So here's the story. The rabbit from Alice in Wonderland, I guess, is running off into a giant jar that leads him into a different dimension, and as the curious little chameleon that you are, you jump in, and doing so, you transform into this thing, which is still a chameleon. Boy, I certainly like a good narrative in my platformers. There are actually 4 different chameleons that you can choose to play as, but I had to go with Fred. I think he speaks to me on a personal level. Chameleon Twist is a pretty basic linear 3D platformer that utilizes one main mechanic, the chameleon's incredibly long tongue. With it, you can slurp up a bunch of enemies and then spit them back out, latch onto different rods to get you to new platforms, or spin around them for some extra challenge, and even get to perform a pole vault. And honestly, that kinda covers the whole game. The adventure has you travel through 6 different lands. Oh hey, look at that! Antland. That's where I live. Each one, of course, has a different aesthetic, but really, if you play one, you've kinda played through them all. In all of them, you go through a series of different rooms, each one offering some sort of platforming or enemy challenge, and then there are these special crowns that can be found if you want to be a true completionist. And yeah, that's it. All right, I just gotta nudge my way off this platform ever so slightly, and that crown is my, okay, cool. So while the game is pretty repetitive, it doesn't overstay its welcome. It honestly takes only about 2 hours to complete, and in that time frame, it manages to stay pretty enjoyable the entire way. The bosses in particular are really satisfying. You just gotta find a weak point and then absorb as many items in your mouth as you can and give yourself some nice big old chubby cheeks. It's kinda cute despite the polygons. And then you just keep attacking until you win. It actually really works. You do that 6 times and then the credits just kind of appear out of nowhere. And yeah, that's Chameleon Twist. There was really no way I was gonna get a full episode out of this game. Chameleon Twist represents a simpler time in gaming. It's definitely nostalgic for the era, but it really won't blow your mind. It did manage to get a sequel though, which is kind of surprising, but I think we'll save that until next time. Honestly, I think the best part about this game is the cat at the very beginning. Yep, definitely that part. Oh yeah, here we go. Now we're getting into some more of the classic stuff out there. Mischief Makers. It's weird. I know I'm talking about this game in the context of it being forgotten, but it's kind of not. People know of Mischief Makers, but they kind of know nothing about it. I never see anyone talking about it, so it may not be forgotten, but it's definitely ignored. And that's a shame. In short, well, Treasure made this game, so you should kind of play Mischief Makers for that alone. The story is pretty basic. This professor has been kidnapped by these alien creatures, and as the professor's creation, you, the robotic maid, Marina, goes out to save him. And while exploring the planet of Clancer, you actually find out that not all of these creatures are bad. Don't associate us with those guys, we're also suffering because of them. Did the game just have some sort of social commentary? This got too real. So the basic idea is to save the day, you just grab on to anything that you can, and you shake the crap out of them.
Shake, shake.
It's a lot more satisfying than you may think. What's really weird about the game is the structure is super confusing. You are presented a pretty basic level map, but you have absolutely no idea what a level is going to have you do until you get there. So there's a lot of ball shaking that goes on. That's a pretty common thread, but then you could capture some alien kids because they ran away from their parents. There's like a little tricycle thing that you can ride. That's kind of neat. You outrun exploding platforms, and that's all that level is. Typically, when the game tosses a new idea at you, the level that's associated with that idea is pretty short, and then there's a good chance you will not see that mechanic again, while some other levels task you with exploring, making those levels a lot longer. It's really inconsistent, and it would be more of a problem than what it really is if it wasn't for the fact that it's actually pretty fun. Like, there's this level about halfway through the adventure where you basically partake in the Olympics, and the final competition is a mathematical face-off. Finally, my years of being good at math in school finally come in handy. Oh, and then, you know, you play dodgeball with the cat. Yeah, you know, as one does. For being a 2D platformer, I really can't say that I've seen one laid out like this before. Okay, so I know I just said that you never really know what to expect from the game's levels, but then this guy showed up, he begged me to shake him, and then he turned into this weird formation of balls and blocks with faces on them. And man, the 90s were actually a mistake this whole time. But ultimately, the biggest problem that I have with Mischief Makers is it does kinda do a pretty poor job of introducing some gameplay mechanics, as well as sometimes not really pointing you in the right direction. In some of the exploration levels, it was actually kinda frustrating because I just didn't know where to go. And then some of the mechanics that just pop up out of nowhere are really cumbersome. Like, there's this pot idea where you get to hold it and then toss items into it, and then depending on what items are in the first few slots, you can then combine them together. And the game is like, oh, you never know what you're gonna get, keep trying out combinations. But it is used so rarely and for such small contextual puzzles that it ended up being pretty annoying to use whenever it did pop up. The bosses can be pretty confusing at times too, often hitting me when I definitely feel like I press the grab button at the appropriate time. It also really doesn't help that there's actually a bit of a delay from pushing the throw button in midair to when she actually does it. The game has a lot going for it, and I'm sure that's why it's so highly regarded. But honestly, it turned out to be a little bit too frustrating and random for its own good, in my opinion. Yes, that's the one mission where you're escaping from danger on an ostrich. It's my favorite part of any game, to be honest. It's like Mario 2, right? Yeah, it's just a big ol' Mario 2 ripoff. But at the very least, there is some replay value. Every level has a gold gem hidden to find, sometimes in pretty arbitrary ways. I don't know how anyone back in the day would have been able to get these without looking at a guide, but yeah, they're certainly hidden, alright. Each boss can give you one too, but you gotta beat them perfectly without taking any damage. And I quickly realized, after like a half hour of trying to beat this dragon thing without getting hit, yeah, that's where I gave up. It does not seem possible. That or I suck. Again, that's very easily a possibility. The game does end off pretty strong though, I'll give it that. Throughout the adventure, you go through plenty main boss battles. There are 3 different commanders that all try to stop you along the way, in pretty glamorous fashion, might I add. This leads off to a battle with their boss, the evil commander. It's a clever name. And then that leads off into the final battle, where all 3 of the previous commanders combine together with their vehicles in a final fight that, admittedly, is pretty cool. The bosses in this game can range from being super easy or pretty frustrating, except for this final boss, which is actually kind of perfect. And then there's the ending, which is, it counts down a timer with the number of how many gold gems you've collected to that point. And since I didn't get them all, eventually the ending just stops when it hits 0. If I got more, though, the ending would actually still continue, and the only way to get 100% is to get the final gem, which you get by getting all the previous gems in the ending. It's weird. It's a very, very weird ending. I will say, though, everything else I've set aside, the main theme is jammin'. Mischief Makers is a game that I certainly like the idea of, but in execution, I feel like it's just a little bit too random and frustrating for me. I don't have the nostalgia that I'm sure a lot of you guys do out there, so sorry to disappoint you. That's just how I see things. I definitely could see why people want a sequel, though. That would be awesome. That alien transformation still haunts my dreams. Last up here today, we have Tonic Trouble. Already, I'm feeling a little weird about this. Just what exactly am I looking at here? What is this weird Rayman knockoff looking thing? Actually, it turns out that this game was in fact created by the creator of Rayman, Michel Ancel. Okay, alright, you know, I'm a little more interested now. In this game, you play as the space janitor, Ed, who drops a can of weird drink to Earth, which ends up transforming everything into evil versions of themselves. And now, the new person in charge, Grog, has to be stopped. This game's gonna try to pull a message of don't litter the environment, isn't it? And then, like, after that cutscene, it cuts to a PowerPoint presentation of the rest of the story? What? Wow, talk about cutting costs. I cannot think of a single other game off the top of my head that just gave up its storytelling halfway through the first cutscene. It's pretty impressive, I'm not gonna lie. The first thing you do is a slide mission as well. Man, what a bizarre opening. From that point, the game does end up following a pretty standard formula throughout the entire adventure. Here is the doctor. He needs some help gathering materials, all conveniently in bunches of 6 to power up his machine to get Ed to where Grog is located. You go and explore pretty linear 3D environments to get the MacGuffins that you need. You get a new ability every time you complete a level to help you out on your next level. You rinse and repeat until the end. Though I will say, the game is very, very rough Often, it just doesn't feel like the game is finished with how bad the camera can be at times, the controls sometimes just aren't responsive, the frame rate dips into insanely low numbers at times. I'll be honest though, just the absurdity of what I was doing did keep me invested until the end. Believe me, a lot of the game, a whole lot of it, is frustrating due to the poor camera and controls like I mentioned before, but I'm clearly just a sick person here. I just had to see what the next level was gonna do to me. Who knows what weird and wacky layout of platforming and puzzles I'll end up hating in 20 minutes. All right, I just want the thing. I just want the thing. All right, fine. You know what? I didn't even want it in the first place. Like, okay, a common mechanic throughout the game is like you'll occasionally stumble upon these popcorn machines that, and I'm really not lying here, are branded Newman's Own.
Super Ed!
Dude, just what the hell was going on in the 90s? I get it, a lot of you guys miss it, myself included, but let's be real here. A lot of you guys who were part of it, you were out of your minds. Alright man, you against me with my dart gun, obviously I'm gonna win. That man exploded. I kinda have a sneaking suspicion here that the developers really had no idea on how to make this adventure make sense. Like, you collect 10 thermometers to increase your maximum life. For some random reason, they probably thought that was funny, but then you also collect bits of mercury, the stuff that's found within thermometers, to heal up. So I guess it ends up making sense. And honestly, while I did kind of enjoy myself here, the game is certainly not pleasant at all to look at. You're kinda just surrounded by caves and metal for the entire way through, just with different colors. You're also expected to collect a majority of these swirly little things too. Oh, they're called antidotes, by the way. I don't know why either. And the only way to do so is with that good old-fashioned backtracking. Oh, talk about having the cherry on top. By collecting enough of them, you then get access to the final item that you need to take on Grog. You then get slingshot into orbit, cause at this point, sure, I'll take it. And after one final level, you battle Grog and his robotic creation. And oh my god, it's mainly flying with these terrible controls. They just had to ruin the final boss, didn't they? After far too much time dealing with that torment, Grog disintegrates? The world goes back to normal, Ed celebrates, and the doc's daughter congratulates you. From now on, we'll take more care of our environment. Oh my god, they actually did it. I am honestly a bit stunned on how poor this game is, considering how good Rayman 2 is. Rayman would go on to be one of the best games on that console, while Tonic Trouble deservedly went on to be forgotten. It's probably where it belongs. At the very least, it does have an interesting spot in the console's history. It just makes Rayman 2 look that much better. At the end of the day here, despite these games being forgotten, they still do all represent a part of gaming history. This was a time where 3D platformers were so prevalent, but people only were interested in the cream of the crop. All of these other games came out to try to get to that success, but barely any of them did. These adventures created brand new worlds, characters, and stories, but I doubt that we'll see companies return to them anytime soon. And really now, in the context of a gaming world where everyone wanted to be 3D, it's amazing that Mischief Makers exists. All this hype around games adding a Z-axis to the X and Y axis for you to play through, and this game goes 2D? It's no wonder this game got lost in the shuffle. I know I just ended up picking 3 games that I wasn't a huge fan of, but here's the thing. Realistically, the quality of these games don't really matter. If you're a fan of the N64 and a fan of platformers, you have 3 more games to check out here. It doesn't matter if they're good or bad, because at the end of the day, these are games that represent this console and that generation. While I didn't enjoy Tonic Trouble, I definitely don't regret playing it. But that's only 3 games now. I'm only scratching the surface of what forgotten platformers are out there. But there is one game that I did want to check out that I think I could go a little bit more in depth with. I know you guys are going to be asking for it anyway, so tune in next time. We have a glove game. The 90s were weird. Glover is the origin story of the Smash Bros. Antagonist, Master Hand. Okay, wait, no, that doesn't sound right. Glover is a licensed game partnered up with Hamburger Helper to help sell more pasta. Okay, wait, that still doesn't seem right. Glover is an underdog story detailing the trials and tribulations of Childish Gambino, aka Donald Glover. Man, that's still, something's not right here. Now, I can't even begin to think about the thought process that led to this game's development. A lot of 3D platformers of this time brought us characters who, a lot of them were animals, there were some aliens here and there. But a glove? Dude, like, why? Why does this exist? A platformer featuring a glove? I mean, it must have worked though. To be fair, I remember specifically asking for this game when I was a kid, and this is still my original copy. Hell, I'm amazed I remember this, but it even sponsored classic WWF for a little while. Now, I haven't played this game in quite a while, and actually this is going to be the first time that I go ahead and beat it. So, that's a bit of a momentous occasion. Let's see what I've been missing out on all these years. It's a glove. Why? A large, lovely castle. I'm liking this so far. So here's the story. Here we have the wizard, named the Wizard. It's a good thing they told me. Okay, so that's not how that works at all. You don't just toss the entire vial in the pool of evil goo. Oh, and hey, look at that, it exploded. That's what you get. As a result of the explosion, he turns into stone and falls to the bottom of the castle, not before both of his gloves fly off him. Well, that's awfully convenient. The crystals that are laying atop the castle's many roofs then start to fall, but thankfully, our hero Glover transforms them into bouncy balls as they all bounce into these portals to other realms. Again, awfully convenient. And what happened to the other glove? Oh, it looks like he's evil now. Uh-oh. Glover got fet. Okay, so oof, that's a whole lot to take here. Let's just dive into the game. Oh no, this game is scary. You can't see anything, the sky is covered in red, that evil menacing laugh just keeps playing in the background. There are bats. Maybe the bats are actually the ones laughing all this time. Oh man, buddy. You alright? Oh, it's no worries though. Thankfully, we got Mr. Tip here to give us some help. Nothing that our friendly neighborhood Mr. Tip can't fix. I don't like that name. The concept of the game is pretty straightforward. You transformed the crystals into balls, so now it's your job to bring the balls back to the castle to recrystallize them and save the wizard. Easy peasy. And of course, you gotta do some platforming to get that done. But it's not just you that gets the platforming done. When you go into a new world for the first time, the ball that you need is right there. Meaning it is your job to bring it safely to the end of each level in order to return it home successfully. That also means this game is one long escort mission. Yoshi's Island, eat your heart out. And you can do a lot with the ball here, to be fair. You can bounce it, you could slap it, you can roll on it. All the standard things that you could do with a hand and a ball that keeps the game's age rating low. And if you're feeling risky, you can transform the ball on the fly to a bowling ball or a small magnetic ball, each having some contextual uses, and lastly, the crystal itself. It scores double points for all of the items that you pick up, but be careful, one false move and... I genuinely love that sound. It's amazing. Basically, you and the ball end up sharing, like, the same life force or something. Like, if you die, you lose a life, but if you lose the ball, you also lose a life. And for some extra fun, sometimes the ball just escapes from you without even meaning to do that, and then it falls, it breaks, then you die. Oh, it's exciting. So this is an entire game based around the idea of bringing a ball from point A to point B, and for a concept that's so simplistic, I'll give the game credit. It has a decent amount of variety, mainly in how Glover controls. Very often you'll run into different potions and stuff that help you solve more puzzles, gather collectibles, or just move the ball someplace else. Spinning collectible symbols. A true staple of the 90s. As for the different worlds that you explore, you have the Atlantis, a carnival, a pirate's world, Fortress of Fear, ooh, spooky, the prehistoric era, and lastly, Out of This World. Man, you even get to travel to space? Oh, that's pretty cool. Look at this super cool dino here. I definitely want to party with them. The changes in the visuals definitely keep the game interesting. The adventure is very bright and colorful, and each level within a world strives for something slightly different. But there is so much fog in this world. Nintendo 64 games notoriously have bad draw distances, so much so that people just ended up jokingly calling it fog. What a cute name for a technical limitation. The soundtrack is surprisingly good too. Most of the tracks are legitimately great. Some of the carnival music, the Atlantis music, even the title screen is pretty good. Didn't see that coming. It's kind of shocking from such a random game like this. Gameplay-wise though, the variety doesn't really exist. It's kind of the same thing the whole way. Just bob and weave the ball safely, hit the switches with the ball, slam your fist into Glover switches, you collect these special Garib cards if you want, and yeah, that's about it. For as weird of a game as this is, it plays pretty well. Glover controls really nicely. The game keeps a fairly consistent frame rate, it's pretty to look at. Compared to some of the other B-tier platformers on this console, it's kind of impressive, actually. It's just those damn ball controls kinda ruin everything. They fight you back at all times, and since the game is all about that, it knocks it down quite a few notches. Whenever you play as Glover, it plays totally fine. Whenever it's just you and not the ball, I never once felt like I didn't have proper full control over his actions. The ball changes everything. Just in terms of basic platforming, so you can't jump with the ball, right? No. You have to dribble it instead, meaning you have to push the button a second before you want to move, since you need to factor in the time it takes for the ball to hit the floor. Oh, and then sometimes the camera absolutely sucks too. Cool, that's fun. And then remember how I said you go to space at the end of the game? It sounds cool, right? And then consider that it's also a lack of gravity. Oh, good God. Now, realistically, it is pretty easy to see why this game got created. Who doesn't love just taking a big bouncing ball and just bouncing it all over the place? It is one of life's simple pleasures. And then you take 3D platformers, which are also awesome, you put those two together. What happened? Thankfully though, the boss battles are relatively simple. It's usually just a matter of hitting them or hitting switches around them, and you just keep doing that until they go down. Except for the Frankenstein monster here, which is just bad. For this one, you have to slowly readjust the positions of all of these platforms to then bring the ball up while bouncing it at the right time to avoid the monster from causing the ball to fall. It's honestly a mess. All the other bosses in this game are fine. Some of them are far too easy for their own good or far too weird. I'm just bowling the ball and hopefully hitting the dinosaur. What? But no, this one sucks. This one is the worst part of the game. And then, rather than having a dedicated final boss, the boss of World 6, Out of This World, is the final boss. The first thing you do here is simply walk into the robot from its foot. There, that was pretty easy. You know, all you gotta do is walk there. It's really not all that difficult. I died, but wait, what? I just did it though. Nothing spawned. That was weird. Oh wait, no, there I am. Okay, I just gotta slide into place. Wow. Okay, yeah, we're good. Cool, we're good. And then the last part here is like the most clever part of the entire game. You're a hand, for crying out loud. So you grab like this big control stick, and now you just shoot this flying robot with as many bouncing balls as possible, which somehow hurts it. I don't understand how that works. They're just bouncing balls, but okay. This is some sort of creativity that the entire game could have used. You bring that final crystal back to the wizard, he returns to normal, as does the evil cross stitch due to the wizard's magic. And yeah, that wraps up Glover. Glover is a weird game. Out of all the B-tier platformers on the N64, it's kinda one of the most iconic. That has to be primarily due to the character's design. I think more people are aware of that than the game itself. And you know what? Fair enough. A four-fingered glove with the face? You gotta remember, this was a time where they told us that this was a chameleon. Glover made perfect sense. There was actually meant to be a sequel, and it did end up getting fairly far into development as a ROM of the beta got uploaded online. It seemed like it was going to be more of a mission-based game than level-based, and you'd be able to move more things around than just a bouncing ball, so that would have been cool. But sadly, that got cancelled, and I'm pretty sure we'll never see another Glover game again. At the very least, though, we did get Billy Hatcher, and it's kind of like a spiritual successor, right? It's just not the same. We're gonna start things off by talking about a game that is near and dear to basically all of our hearts, Super Mario 64. And what else can really be said about this classic? It shook the industry at its core back in the day, and personally speaking, it was quite magical my first time playing through. And even nowadays, the game is still pretty That ain't Mario. That's Green Mario. Welcome to Super Mario 64 ROM hacks. Now, these ROM hacks have a bit of an interesting history. While you would assume that modifying a three-dimensional game as opposed to two-dimensional would provide just a ton of super simple hacks that get a couple little things done, like changing Mario into Green Mario, for example, would be really the entirety of it, that's actually not the case. The earliest hack that I can remember that was actually super surprising was Super Mario 64: The Missing Stars in the far-off year of 2009. And I mean, hey, look at this! Totally new landscapes, a modified HUD, and totally new mechanics like a day-night cycle that provide different missions without needing to go through the classic star selection screen. There's only 38 stars in this adventure, but still, it was super cool to see at the time. After seeing so many hacks of Sonic the Hedgehog and Super Mario World, seeing someone put genuine effort that shows in a 3D game was awesome. It may not seem all that impressive now, but it set the framework for years in the future. And two recent major hacks show just how far this hacking scene has come. First up, we have SM64 Star Road. Aw man, where to begin with this one? This hack is awesome. At its essence, well, it is a full-scale 130-star adventure with completely new and fleshed out worlds and a varied lineup of missions. The hub world is really nice, even holding a few secrets here and there. The soundtrack is filled with a bunch of remixes from games like Mario RPG, Donkey Kong Country 2, and even Bomberman 64. And man, it's just a lot of fun. The level designs have a good blend of exploration and proper platforming, and with a camera that's actually pretty good, I know, contain your shock. If any hack in this video is considered must play, it's gonna be this one. I know I'm totally just getting ahead of myself here, but this is easily the best hack of Mario 64 yet. I even like the slightly changed colors of the plumber for some reason. It's not much, but it looks nice. And it even pulls off some really unheard of stuff, like if you get a game over, you actually get tossed into this little area that you must escape to get back to the adventure. Star Road ain't nothing to mess with. I could talk about this for 20 minutes, but let's move on. Now, not too long ago, we have a more conceptually advanced hack, Last Impact. And, So, getting the good out of the way up front, there is plenty of brand new stuff that is exclusive to this hack. Like there's a fully playable file select screen, there's cutscenes, and no, your eyes are not fooling you, it's even in widescreen. It's actually super surreal playing Mario 64 this way. I mean, you could play it in 4x3, but like, why? For the most part though, the adventure follows the same idea as Star Road. You have a bunch of new areas to explore with original missions to do. But the worlds are much larger, missions are more varied, and there's even a plethora of new power-ups. Yes, I am currently using the Flood right now. That's pretty cool. The space level also uses Meteor Herd's theme from Sonic Adventure 2, and I don't care what anybody says, I still love that soundtrack. There is a lot of really cool things going on in this hack. However, while all of this stuff is impressive, it's going for far more than it's really capable of. I get the feeling the hacker went for more of a look at this cool thing I added approach rather than a look at this fun thing I added approach. The game can be shockingly frustrating at times, and some of the missions are far too directionless, despite the addition of the cutscenes that introduce each of the missions. Like, here's a perfect example. I just started a race with this mermaid, but I have absolutely no idea where she went. Could be that the camera was completely facing the opposite direction and the game didn't tell me where she was gonna go in the first place. Eventually, I did figure out where to go, but even once I passed this awful camera, I didn't have enough air. If only the game pointed me in the right direction of the frog suit, or even told me the thing existed in the first place, I'd have been fine. Now, this is not really a game-wide issue, but I still found myself more annoyed than I should have. I think I'm in a minority here since I think people actually really like this one, so Last Impact is definitely worth checking out, simply based on its impressiveness, but for me, it is honestly way too frustrating for its own good. If you're gonna pick one, Star Road is the way to go. But see now, that is both sides of the timeline right there, the Genesis and the modern. And there are also plenty of full-scale hacks that have been made on top of these. One example, Super Mario 64 Green Stars. Stop me if you've heard this before. We have a brand new hub world, new levels with different settings and a full range of missions, and a whopping total of 130 stars to collect. It's not as good as Star Road, but it's still awesome to see, and like, this is why I love really good ROM hacks. You basically have the equivalent of a full game that blends familiar with new, and it is awesome. I may not be a fan of Last Impact, but I can at least appreciate and admire its existence. But finally, that is enough time spent raving. It's time to take a look at all of the other stuff that's thrown here somewhere in the middle. First up, there's Thwomp's Easter Egg Hunt, and here you actually play as the Thwomp. It's an interesting choice, I'll give them credit on that. Your job is to run around, or I guess hop around, all of the areas trying to find Easter eggs, I guess? I mean, I think that's what I'm trying to do, but I don't know. It seems like a neat idea, but this is just absolute hell to control. You constantly need to jump and maintain momentum, and platforming on top of that is a near impossibility. There's also these weird static Banjo Kazooie models just thrown around randomly. I don't know, man. I played this for like 20 minutes and I didn't see a single egg. I'm pretty sure they're just a myth. If there's any Easter egg hunt that you want to go on, the better choice here is to play Goomba's Easter egg hunt. And by the grace of Miyamoto, look at him go. He can actually move. And the game looks a lot better too. The aesthetics definitely fit the Mario theme here, and the music is nice and energetic. This is what I'm talking about. The camera can be a bit annoying to work with, but it is still loads better than the last one. There's your typical Mario grasslands, a space area with lower gravity, and even a purely 2D area. Not enough Mario 64 hacks go for this type of thing. This is the level select room from Glover? Why? By the time I got to the desert stage though, things started to get a bit unnecessarily tough for me, so I think it's time I tap out. And well, the Banjo-Kazooie models are here again for no real reason, and I'm constantly questioning that. Super Banjo-Kazooie 64. It's the levels from Banjo-Kazooie, but in Mario 64. That was a simple enough explanation. Now unfortunately, don't get too excited here, it's not as good as it sounds. The camera was clearly not built for levels like this, and honestly, the hack itself doesn't seem to be built for levels like this. It's a really great idea that's worth some time, and it only has 30 stars, so it's okay for what it is. Man, can you imagine Luigi and Bottles hanging out? That would be just the most perfect pair of nerds, and I would love to see that. And in fact, the same idea was even done for Banjo-Tooie's levels. Again, it doesn't really work out as well as I would like to, but it's at least really cool to look at, and some of the missions are legitimately fun. There's even an attempt to recreate the massive hub world of ILO Hags, and it actually kinda succeeds. And you know what? Why not? Let's go for the hat trick, Super Donkey Kong 64. And hey, I was actually ready to hate on this one too, but it actually has a bit more work put into it. Like this area here that was used with Tiny Kong in the source game was actually properly recreated. That's cool. You can get power-ups by getting enough stars. There's even an area that transports you to different levels through Cranky's lab. Again, just like the source game. And I gotta say, it's actually pretty refreshing moving through this game this quickly, considering the original moves at the pace of a sloth. Forget about a gorilla. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of DK64, what of it? Now say what you will about the Wii U, but that console is home to Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, so it will always be worth owning. An awesome puzzle game starring the mushroom-capped hero, Captain Toad. And you can probably guess where I'm going with this, Captain Toad 64. Now this is only a proof of concept, only having one level, but it's so cool. Unlike the actual Captain Toad, you can jump, but as you can see, doesn't really do much of anything. As a result, it is up to you to figure out how to get from one platform to another and get all of the treasure before collecting the big star. It's a Mario game where the main character traverses the world without jumping. I love it. Actually, there is a similar hack that changes all of the textures into the monkey's face. You hackers are a bunch of sick people, you know that? Now, if you're familiar with Super Mario World hacking, the name Kaizo will either ring a bell or bring up war flashbacks. Some would argue that this style of hack really offers up a unique challenge. Others would argue that it's really bad level design. Think you know where I stand. But why do I bring this up now? I am glad you asked. Kaizo Mario 64. Ah yes, the line of fire shooting through the pipe bit. Classic. Immediately, we're left with an interesting challenge. The door is blocked. Also fire. And there is a block pyramid just on the opposite side. Also fire. Now, if you're a veteran of Mario 64, you know that within that block pyramid is the respawn point. So what you have to do is die from the fire, so you spawn inside of the pyramid, you quickly talk to the pink bomb that's in there, and then you can open up the path and get inside the castle. Off to a good start so far. Alright, let's see what Bob-omb Battlefield has in store. Oh no wait, sorry. Chain Chomp Battlefield. Let me guess. Yep, okay. There's copy and pasting chain chomps all over the place. Beautiful. I mean, it's not as hard to traverse as it may appear to be. It's just, it's confusing, really. Oh, and the warp spots have changed too. That's a challenge, right? Now I gotta play through the level like how Nintendo wanted me to. Oh, it's tough. The battlefield is just covered in chain chomps. What is the challenge here? Oh no, I can't possibly beat King Baba. Oh hey, look at that, I beat him. Cool. Alright. They can't possibly screw up the secret slide, can they? Ah, yes. Of course they can. I was foolish. At least a dozen attempts later, I finally made it. The star is just not gonna show up, is it? I hate Kaizo so much. Alright everyone, here we are. We're playing the ever-famous Adventure Mode from Super Smash Bros. Melee. We got Mario here for this one, of course, my main, and you know, the one thing I always loved about Adventure Mode was the fact there was a whole lot more than just fighting. We got full-on platforming, dungeon crawling, oh yeah, collecting red coins on the R-Wing, that was always my favorite part. Oh, and yeah, how can I forget about the beating up Pikachu's bit? You can't forget about the beating up Pikachu's bit, that part's great. Getting into the Blue Falcon and driving along Big Blue. Doi, wait a minute, this isn't Melee, this is a ROM hack. I really should have known, this part here really threw me off. But yes, today we're going to be taking a look at ROM hacks and mods for Super Smash Bros. But as you can clearly tell, this goes far beyond just Smash. This was actually the hack that inspired this entire video. Adventure mode recreated in Super Mario 64. Such a cool idea. Given the nature of how that mode was done, the levels within really lend themselves to the movement options possible in SM64. It can be stressful too, man. There's a timed Brinstar escape like you would expect, and wow. If we ever needed a reminder that precision platforming wasn't really this game's strong suit, this would be it. But you may be saying, what if Mario isn't my main? Well, no worries there. We got a whole slew of extra characters to play as. You got Luigi, Fox, Ness, and even Captain Falcon, each with their own little slight tweaks. The only real issue though is Falcon isn't fast enough to outrace Samurai Goro's vehicle on foot, and admittedly, that would just be kinda cool. Big shout outs to the creator of this one. Pasta Power, man, such a cool idea and it was done so well. And as an additional bonus, they went ahead and hacked in not only Fox, but also Falco in the base Super Mario 64 as well. These basic little character swap hacks are such a simple pleasure in life, man. They're so cool. Oh man, you move so fast when you're carrying King Babam too. This is great. All right, King, I'm done with your shenanigans. Let's go. Done with you. You're grounded. We're through. God damn it. Not really sure where this is going, but I'm excited. Oh, this is incredible. Hyrule Temple from Melee, the infamously huge stage with nooks and crannies aplenty. It is not something I've ever thought of before, but with some creative liberties, it does kind of make for a really fascinating platformer stage. And in Banjo Kazooie, no less. It's so refreshing seeing this after playing as many Mario 64 hacks as I have. This is no simple drag and drop of the source stage either. All of the set pieces are definitely here, but there was a lot more added to make this feel as fulfilling as an actual Banjo level. We got 100 musical notes and 8 jiggies to collect. You gotta make that ride really enticing, you know? Yeah, you know, this area at the very bottom, that is definitely familiar, but scaling this mountainside to check out the top of these castles? Super cool idea, and it makes sense within the level's context. And my favorite part by far was the secret door that led to Zelda 2's title screen. Oh, I loved that a lot. It's time to talk about Smash 64. This is, in my opinion, the most exciting modding scene at the moment, as far as Smash is concerned, simply based on how new it all feels. As expected, on a bare bones level, we do have a few new individual stages. There's Tetris-themed, Banjo-Kazooie, Bomberman 64, even a brand new Break the Target stage featuring elements from every main level, which is really cool. Big shoutouts to Snooplax. He does a great job showcasing mods like this and many more, and is even responsible for creating a few of these. Wouldn't have known about some of these levels if it wasn't for him, so good job, dude. Like this full hack right here, Super Sonic Bros, a mod pack that replaces all of the stages with ones inspired by the original Sonic the Hedgehog, with all of the appropriate music attached to them, of course. They're simple layout changes here, we're not dealing with any new gimmicks or anything like that, but they all still feel like the stages they're representing, and that is all I need to see. And also, there's a Sonic 2 variant here, Super Sonic 2 Bros. And I mean, come on now, Sonic 2 is better than Sonic 1, so singing those same exact praises, but with Sonic 2 themes instead? This instantly makes this the better hack. I'm sorry, I don't make the rules. Gameplay-wise, Smash 64 is definitely less intense than all of the newer entries, so having stuff like this is a great incentive to give this old game another shot, especially since you see most of what these hacks have to offer in a single run of the single-player mode. A perfect way to experience what these are all about. But if you're a long-time ROM hack episode watcher on my channel, you already know that I love when someone can take an old game and completely transform it into something totally new. Brawl definitely had that, but it's infinitely cooler when we get that with something even older. Everybody say hello to Smash Remix. So you know how a mod like Project Plus adds an incredible amount of content and customization to Brawl? Well, I love that I'm able to say that Smash Remix does the same exact thing, but for Smash 64. Oh baby, this character select menu. I love this. We got all these Melee characters showing up, even a couple from Brawl and beyond. All of these new fighters have new movesets too. They play just like you think they would, even with the limited options of Smash 64. And on all of the returning characters, pressing the D-pad in a different direction brings up variations like polygon versions, accessing Metal Mario, Giant Donkey Kong, even Giga Bowser, and even, why not, regional variants. I do believe this means gameplay differences, but the most important change is while American Smash goes, Japanese Smash goes. That is very important. And Oh man, I'm gonna do it again. The stage selection. Holy cow, this is so good. There's multiple pages? Oh, you get to play on the desk from the opening cutscene, and it's called First Destination. That is so clever. The only real way to describe Smash Remix is absolute overload. Enough changes were implemented to make the game feel distinct from the pure Smash 64, so with that in mind, being able to play with new and familiar characters on stages like Mementos from Persona 5, Goomba Road from Paper Mario, a basketball court from NBA Jam, I guess? It's probably from another Smash mod, but I don't know. You get to slam dunk your opponents with the barrels. That's all I needed to see, man. The stage is great. New challenge levels for all of the new fighters, a pretty cool 12-character battle mode, sort of similar to Smashdown from Ultimate, and the best part, this hack is still getting updated consistently. As I was working on this episode, a new version dropped with new items, Kirby hats for all of the new fighters, which is great because I was ready to complain that they weren't in the version I was working with before this dropped, and the Bowser hat on Kirby is just so damn cute, and even, oh man, get this, the Mad Piano from Super Mario 64 as a playable fighter. Oh, this is amazing. He can chomp you, he shoots books at you. When you taunt, he plays a little bit of music. This is amazing. And something else really cool is you can even play this on a real Nintendo 64. Simply load up the ROM on something like an EverDrive and boom, it's like it's a real game or something. Sure, it definitely looks worse than an emulator, no doubt, but there is something really cool about being able to play this on an actual console. You can actually do the same thing with that Banjo Kazooie hack too. That's so much fun. Man, the ROM hacking scene is so damn cool. Last year, we took a look at some N64 platformers that I would consider to be more on the forgotten side of things. Tonic Trouble, Mischief Makers, and Chameleon Twist. And while I wasn't the biggest fan of everything that those games had to offer, I thought they were still worth playing. Hey, if the entire console generation is going to be considered the golden age of 3D platformers, you may as well play everything there is to play, and then some. I have since gone ahead and played the Chameleon Twist sequel, and boy, what happened here? I'm sorry, was the original Chameleon just too cute for the hardcore gamers? At least everywhere except Japan, they kept it adorable. That's appreciated. High voltage screaming action. Certainly that's subjective. I was thinking that I would have a lot more to say about this game going into this episode, but honestly, I don't. It's kinda just a not as good Chameleon Twist, with a whole lot more waiting. Like, holy cow, the game asks you to wait so many times. And then like, there's this weird roulette power-up that sometimes just turns your run into a crawl, just like that, and you're forced to deal with it for a little bit. I mean, sometimes the power-up does nothing at all, which is weird, but I would much rather that than being forced to go slow in a platformer. That sucks. Overall though, Chameleon Twist 2, not terrible, but you're better off playing the first one. Even if the new Chameleons just look like an ugly Yuka. Nah, I take it back, the sequel's better. But I made sure to listen after that last episode. You see, I thought I knew the entire N64 library, but I really wanted to see what you guys were going to be suggesting in the comments of said episode. I know, it's a novel concept. So, if you're in the market for some more N64 platformers out there that are a bit under the radar, this is the place to be. Oh man, if any game oozes that good old 90s cheese, it's Space Station Silicon Valley. A slideshow of images of janky 3D models, acting like an old CRT TV with the interface, using Comic Sans for the font, the absolute madmen. And the story here is so ridiculous it's on a level that I really couldn't anticipate. So, the Space Station Silicon Valley, filled with robotic animals and a few scientists, disappeared after it launched in the year 2001. 1,000 years later, in the year 3000, it reappears, and it's on a collision course towards Earth. Well, I guess we know now where Sonic Adventure 2 got its inspiration. So Dan Danger and his robot companion Evo set off to investigate. Dan Danger, that's a pretty sweet name. Well, as expected, their ship crashes, causing Evo to eject out of his seat and break into a bunch of pieces. And, well, this is where the core concept of the game comes from. You take control of Evo's microchip, which allows you to take over the wide variety of animals that are spread throughout the entire space station. And whenever you enter one for the first time, there's this sick Matrix-esque reveal of what the animal is and what it can do. That's pretty sweet. And the amount of animals that you can take control of is wild. There's rocket-shooting dogs, elephants, hyena bikers, camels that spit, a king rat that farts. Oh, and the normal mice just poop. Nice, dude. And each of these creatures are introduced at a great pace. You see, the game is structured with a basic level setup, with each one dropping you off into a small sandbox, and you have a few objectives to go through. And once you set off, well, it's up to you to explore and experiment with what works and what doesn't, and, well, it's not always pleasant. But the creativity of what these animals can do shines through so often, and when it finally clicks on which one you need to take control of to do the thing that's asked of you, oh, it's very satisfying. But then the game has you do combat every now and then, and it blows. Mainly because it takes no time for you to die. No lie, if the game had like an infinite health code or something, it would be way more enjoyable. I know I'm complaining, oh man, games are just too hard for stupid old me. Nah, this is pretty cheap. There are some minor control issues, like some animals move too slow, some animals platform in pretty cumbersome ways, but come on now, it's an N64 quotes platformer. Some of these things just come with the platform. Like, listen to this, sometimes the camera isn't great. I know, truly shocking to hear. But the health issue is really the only part of the game that's actively preventing you from enjoying it a lot more, with no better way to progress than kinda just hope that this time you get lucky. Even when I go in knowing exactly what I have to do, sometimes the character will just be like 1 inch to the left or something like that, and I'll get hit by some other missile that I didn't get hit from last time, and there you go, gotta start again. It can kinda suck. That being said though, based purely on the originality and the sense of style that is overwhelming in this game, I still had a good time. It is definitely more annoying than it should be at times, but I can't say I've really played anything like it. I guess Super Mario Odyssey letting you take control of a ton of different things with Cappy sorta comes close, but that's about it. The soundtrack is pretty poppin' too, and it actually plays in the game world. That's pretty cool. So yeah, not perfect, but a damn interesting game to say the least. During an era where a lot of these games were considered Super Mario 64 clones, it's nice to see one do something absolutely original. You know, these developers would make another game on the 64 called Body Harvest, a sort of open world third-person shooter where you like shoot the crap out of insects. It looks pretty cool. Come to find out that actually that team, DMA Design, would become Rockstar North, the people behind Grand Theft Auto. So yeah, pretty cool history all around. You know, put a microchip and some robotic animals into Grand Theft Auto 6, and we may have something there. And speaking of Super Mario 64 clones and companies with interesting history, Rocket Robot on Wheels. It kinda sucks that this game is considered forgotten because, oh man, do I ever adore it. Sucker Punch, the company known for the Sly Cooper and Infamous franchises, got their start with this adorable little robot dude. Although Rocket only has one wheel and the title implies that he has multiple, now we know why the game didn't sell well. The theme park, Whoopi World, is in crisis. While the owner is out at a party, the mascot's sidekick, Jojo, is tired of the walrus Whoopi being the star of the show, and he finally takes his chance to do something about it. And Rocket, the obedient little robot that he is, goes off to explore the park, retrieve all of the tickets and tokens that Jojo stole, as well as Whoopi, and make sure that everything is good for the park's opening day. It's a pretty interesting premise that gives you just enough reason to go on an adventure. And once you start exploring, it's obvious that this game nails that amusement park aesthetic perfectly. Just in the first level alone, we're dropped off onto a beachside boardwalk with a rideable hot dog car, there's multiple attractions to take part in, and there's even a roller coaster creator that you're then able to go and ride yourself. That's really cool. Not every stage necessarily goes for that theme park aesthetic, but the things that you're able to do within each of them are just so out there and varied, it ends up being a super compelling adventure from start to finish. And this is also thanks to how Rocket controls. If you played Sucker Punch's other games, then you would know that they have a certain sense of flow and momentum to them when it comes to the platforming, while still being able to nail where you want to go at almost all times. Rocket has that same exact feel from his bouncy jumps, swinging, grabbing hold of items and throwing them. It just feels really good. We have an original idea with an adorable mascot character that fits in right with the rest of them. Need I remind you, one of them was a glove, and it's all presented to us in a gameplay style that we're definitely familiar with. But outright labeling any 3D platformer as a Super Mario 64 clone isn't really fair to what the game does on its own. That being said, it is structured in a similar way, more so like Banjo Kazooie than anything else. Each level is a sandbox with a dozen tickets to get for completing objectives, there's a couple health upgrades upgrades to find, and 200 tokens to collect that can be brought over to Tinker in the homeworld to unlock some more abilities like a grappling hook or ice breath. And every single tool in your arsenal is put to the test, so when the time comes for the final level, this massive obstacle course, you feel ready for it because you already messed with everything you have available to you. And no worries if you think you'll get lost. Each collectible ticket has a little hint attached to them, and your quest to find everything is nothing a little bit of exploration and experimentation can't solve. And while we can argue whether or not a lava pit here is something that constitutes a theme park setting, it's awesome that each level has a strong identity, from one having a big painting mechanic to one being entirely based on riding a flying carpet. Again, frustrations do show up from time to time, but on the whole, it is a damn magical 3D platformer, and considering how good Sucker Punch's later games were, I would say that this makes them one of the most consistent third-party developers out there. Funnily enough, I've also always considered this part of an unofficial platformer trilogy with Rayman 2 and Tonic Trouble. Not just because Ubisoft published all three, but because back in 1998 there was this promo tape that advertised all three games. And for me, it was at the start of this Rayman cartoon VHS tape that I had, because that was totally a thing. And since I didn't own this game until I got older, as well as Tonic Trouble, I watched this advertisement over and over again. It is ingrained into my psyche. The Tonic Trouble commercial was just a bunch of people beating up tomatoes. Well, yeah, sure, I'll buy that game. All these years later, being able to finally play these games to completion and talk about it with you guys is personally really satisfying. Also, it's the best game on the 64 to come in a red cartridge. Take that, Jeremy McGrath. And finally, we're ending off with Mystical Ninja starring Goemon. You know, I did want to go into this talking about just how forgotten this little guy is, but he recently just got a costume in Smash Bros. Ultimate. How awesome is that? It was revealed like 20 seconds before Sans, so he immediately went back to being forgotten, but hey, for those 20 seconds, ooh, what a time to be alive. Overall though, Mystical Ninja is indeed a forgotten series, which is crazy because it's absolutely massive. Just gotta do one little internet search here, bam! A couple of the localized games did make their way to the Virtual Console services, but for the most part, this is a large franchise in Japan, and that's about it. They gave one game a shot on the Super Nintendo, and of course here we are talking about one of their attempts on the N64. And yeah, it takes no time to see just how Japanese we're dealing with here. Right as you boot the game up, we got a full-on anime-esque opening, all done with the in-game models, which is pretty wild for the 64, and actual Japanese vocals being sung. Well, if they want me to really feel like I'm in a Japanese setting, they nailed it. While our heroes Goemon and Ebisumaru were out shopping, a giant flying object appears and fires a laser at Oedo Castle, fully transforming it. So after we have Ebisumaru do this for a little bit, we go off to investigate. From there, honestly, the story ends up going a bunch of different ways. This really does have that sort of long-running anime feel to it. The second one story arc ends, we start off on another one, but all with the goal of stopping this evil idol, Spring Breeze Dancin'. That's a pretty fantastic name, all things considered. Now, I knew absolutely nothing about this series going into this game, but if you had told me earlier that this is essentially a Zelda-styled adventure where you explore different lands and towns with the main goal of getting through different dungeons, except you do a lot more platforming than puzzle solving, yeah, I would have signed up for this years ago. Navigation can be a bit confusing at times. In my experience, it's best to have a guide on you, since the game doesn't really do an awesome job reminding you of where you need to go next. But once you have that sense of direction, it is surprisingly super fun. You explore massive castles, deal with ghosts with the power of a special camera, turn yourself into a mermaid to deal with underwater sections. Fast travel is courtesy of a giant flying dragon, and hey, if you do want to be traditional and stick to the in-game method of trying to figure out what to do next, you can always ask for assistance from Plasma Man. Well, now that's absolutely terrifying. And like, whenever something kind of humorous happens in the story, a laugh track plays? Man, this game is weird. Oh, and just in case you were wondering, because I know you were, Of course Goemon can go Super Saiyan, why would you think otherwise? For the most part, this is what the entire game is all about. Talking to civilians in different towns, mowing down a bunch of enemies across the lands, and getting through the obstacles that stand in your way in the dungeons leading up to boss fights. And the whole time, the soundtrack is fantastic. Constant jams from start to finish. But when the game does want to change things up, well, that's when you call upon this giant mech, Impact, accompanied with its own theme song. Because of course it does. And after running towards the villain in question, destroying anything that you come in contact with, you then take part in a first-person punch-out style fight with laser beams, throwing fists all over the place. This is ridiculous. They were pretty difficult to get through at first as well, but once I learned about some of these special moves that you can pull off, oh boy, did I ever just dominate from then on. This game is fantastic. Dare I say, when it comes to third-party games on the Nintendo 64, something that the console didn't really excel at, this is easily one of the best that you can play. They did make another game on the N64 with Goemon's Great Adventure, which does have similar elements, but this is a 2D platformer instead, something more in line with the other Goemon game that released outside of Japan. The plot is ridiculous, has to be expected at this point. The game overall is a bit tough actually, especially in co-op, but once again, super fun. It's also one of the few mythical games out there on the N64 that actually uses the D-pad. Pretty interesting. I would say we definitely had a better lineup of games this time around. Titles that do a much better job representing the N64 generation as the quote-unquote golden age of 3D platformers. I may not be over the moon about Space Station Silicon Valley, but I can always appreciate when a game strives to do something original. And hell, I finally saw the opportunity to talk about Rocket Robot on Wheels. That's good enough for me. Like I said last time, the quality of these games doesn't really matter in this case. I just enjoy finally getting to explore everything that this console has to offer. Mario Party 1. Oh boy, the commercial for this game was wild, man. Mario straight up gets arrested. What a way to sell a Mario game. Mario Party 1, also known as... And with this unholy amalgamation of Mario and board game, Mario Party was born. The game begins with a bit of a story. 5 of the Mushroom Kingdom's finest and Wario are arguing about which of them is the biggest star. You got Peach out here getting kidnapped every 2 minutes with the nerve to think that she's the best one of the group. Even Mario is like, is she a for real? What the, oh god, guys, what are you doing to poor Weege? Eventually the arguing gets to be too much, and then Toad ascends into the heavens. It's decided that the only way to figure out which character here has all the qualities needed to be a superstar, whatever that means, a competition must be held. Those qualities being strength, wisdom, courage, and kindness. 3 of those things are just the Triforce. Everybody runs towards the pipe leading to Party Town, and then boom, party time. Few things in life are as satisfying as seeing a story introduced into a party game as a glue to stick everything together. Personally, I would have preferred a story that doubled down on the whole Mario getting arrested idea. I think at this point everyone is well aware about the way to play Mario Party. You get your turn placement at the start of the board, and then you just kinda go, and then whatever happens, happens. And we got a good handful of boards to play on for this first soiree, most of them being based on the characters involved in said soiree. They try to take advantage of what the characters were all about at this point in time. So Donkey Kong has a jungle, Yoshi's got an island, Peach has a birthday cake, Mario has a castle in the sky, Wario has a war zone? That's a bit of a stretch there, I didn't play that game. And then Luigi has an engine room. Is Mario Party predicting the future with Luigi taking advantage of technology in his own adventures that wouldn't release for a few years after this? Makes you think. Rounding off the boards are Bowser's Magma Mountain and Eternal Star. Like I said, it's a pretty good lineup. It's the first game in the series here. What better way to hit the ground running than by making boards that are based on the characters involved? Even if they're as dumb conceptually as plants on a cake. To spice the different boards up, each one is paired with its own sorta gimmicks. Like Yoshi's Tropical Island, for example, is all about traveling between 2 different islands. Peach's birthday cake is based on planting flowers? For some reason, yo, what is this woman doing planting flowers on her cake? Luigi's engine room has barriers that alternate between open and closed to really mess up someone's plans, and Wario's Battle Canyon is bad. One of these boards had to take that title, after all. Magma Mountain, though, this one is legitimately dumb. Every couple turns, the game just decides to constantly take a bunch of your coins away. But what would a Mario Party game be without the good old-fashioned chance time? It did make its debut here in this first game, and it's kind of as crazy as ever. Within the span of like 30 to 60 seconds, the entire momentum of the game changes, and it is honestly awesome. I know people don't like the randomness of this, but quite frankly, the yelling that ensues when this happens with a bunch of friends, oh, it's so worth it. Overall, though, the boards are just kind of okay, and they're pretty repetitive, honestly. Despite some gimmicks popping up here and there, the boards kinda tend to feel pretty similar. You can occasionally have like this mushroom block pop up to let you roll again, or you skip a next turn. That kind of makes things a little more interesting, but no, every board kind of feels the same. To be fair though, I'm pretty sure the developers were really just testing the waters here, throwing whatever they could at the wall and seeing what sticks. That explains how Mario Party 2 is so much better. And you want to know how I know this is the case? Well, to access any of the minigames in free play mode, you have to buy them. Oh, but okay, what if I can't afford the game that I want to play? Oh, no worries there, I'm glad you asked. You just rent them instead. Okay, so going against what people typically say here, not all of the minigames in this first game are bad. Some of them are actually quite good and still hold up. Bombs Away was always a favorite of mine growing up. I am more than willing to show off in a game of Crazy Cutter or Facelift. Bumper Balls is here. That's a plus automatically. Oh my, what kind of weird abomination is that? To be honest, the 4-player minigames are generally pretty okay. It's when you play anything else that the game takes a nosedive. The 1 versus 3 games either heavily favor the 1 or the 3, providing no equal level of challenge. One of them is damn near just a game of chance. It's practically impossible to tell which pipe goes where. There are far too many single-player games that pop up way too often. They just feel like a waste of time, in my opinion. And then the 2v2 games? There's only like a couple of them, and damn, man, they're just kind of okay too. Although I will say, I am a big fan of Bombskitball. It's a clever name for a clever game. Pedal Power? Yeah, you just rotate the analog stick. Castaways? Oh, you just throw the line out and then you rotate the analog stick. Paddle Battle? I want to die. Doesn't matter how much time you let pass, you think that maybe it's just a meme. Maybe Mario Party 1 isn't that painful to actually play. No. Oh boy, this game hurts. Many of you know the story now as well, but these games caused so much legitimate pain and blisters to children's hands back in the day that Nintendo actually got sued and started sending out gloves to those who can provide a proof of purchase for their game. Say what you will about how they thought this was a good idea in the first place, it is a very, very crazy part of Nintendo's history. I even have this brand new and pretty solid third-party controller with a great analog stick, but really it doesn't eliminate the pain. Ask anyone from back in the day who played Mario Party as a kid, I'm pretty sure their analog stick looks like this. I think it kinda goes without saying here, but Mario Party 1, it definitely suffers from being the first game in the series. Despite all that, it's still not the worst game in the series, but it's easily the weakest of the N64 ones. I spent a ton of time playing this when I was a kid, like in the single player minigame island mode, which just had you play every minigame with a mini challenge tied to it. I always appreciated when a multiplayer game had some sort of single player components. It was weird too, because you'd make your way to the top of the island, and then the final boss was Toad. Can you imagine Toad as the final boss? Of anything. Amazing. I have played this game with friends over the years, that's for sure, but really only to remind them of the pain. I have taken a bit of pleasure in seeing fresh reactions to playing a video game that actually physically pains them. Boy, yeah, we should play Mario Party 1. You may have heard some things, but you don't know what's coming. We should play Paddle Battle, that'll be fun. That explains how I've lost friends over the years. We want Mario games with golf and tennis in them, if that makes any sense. We already had options for normal sports games. If you wanted to play as a realistic Tiger Woods in a boring realistic golf course while avoiding lame realistic scandals, you already had those games to choose from. I want a golf with the Goombas. And thus, a champion entered the arena. Camelot. Oh, wait, sorry.
Camelot!
Yeah, he says it way better than I ever could. By this point in the company's timeline, Camelot definitely had a track record, but clearly it was their work with Hot Shots Golf on PS1 that was enough for Nintendo to trust them with their top IP. I can't say too much about that series as a whole, I've only ever played the first one, but hey, it's the only one that Camelot actually worked on, and wow, it's pretty uncanny with just how similar it ended up being to Mario Golf 64. You can see the framework all over this one. And right out of the gate, the rebirth of Mario Sports hit the ground running. Opening cutscenes for both golf and tennis. We start off being greeted by the cast enjoying their day and getting into mischief. And man, I love this so much. It's pretty rare to get full-blown cutscenes with any of these characters. It injects so much personality into a genre where you really wouldn't expect it. The human characters start showing up, Plum, who many of you have seen in the Smash Bros. Melee trophy. This is where she made her debut. What do you mean you forgot about Plum? This is also where we got our first whiff of Waluigi, a character so many people love for some reason. Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I never really got the massive appeal. I apologize to the Waluigi fanbase out there. I'm a bit more of a Blue Mario guy myself. He made his debut in this game too, and nobody talks about him. He's the true underdog. But this level of charm is exactly what these games needed. When I said we wanted Mario games with sports in them, this is what I meant. This translates to the gameplay too. For both golf and tennis, we do have options to, of course, play a standard game with normal rules, but if you dig into the menu a little bit more, you can play tennis with item boxes in Bowser's Castle, go for a round of golf on Yoshi's Island. Golf 64 has a mini golf mode that we haven't seen in any of the other Mario Golf games, and I don't know, I always liked it. Or partake in a ring challenge in both sports. It's such a fun concept for an additional challenge, and it's simply great having more stuff to do. This whole ring idea works in both sports perfectly. And yes, it helps that the arcadey vibe is perfect here as well. Everything is so snappy and punchy. The soundtracks to these games are incredible too. And man, going back to that cast of characters, I mean, we got Plum, Maple, Harry. I'll give them credit. They got their one game, they got their money, and they got out. That's true goals. And if you loved those opening cutscenes, well, that charm carries into the whole animations in golf and the trophy celebrations in tennis. Dude, the trophy celebrations, these are like the best part of the game. Short clips of Mario characters just doing things with a trophy in frame. I love this. Wario talks like a damn Pokemon in his.
Wario, number one, Wario, number one, Wario.
That's amazing. And the icing on top of all of this, you could even transfer your characters to the console versions. You don't really see too many people talking about this feature nowadays because with the re-releases of the N64 games, people being nostalgic about the GameCube games, it's kind of just fallen by the wayside. But thanks to the N64 having a transfer pack, as well as the GameCube having the GBA link cable, you were able to take your characters, put them on the big screen, and it was so damn cool. Dude, the fact that your human character has their own trophy animation in tennis, that's amazing. That's me getting a trophy from Red Luigi. Banjo-Kazooie is one of the best platformers of all time. It's an amazing culmination of great art style, level design, music, game mechanics, world building, script writing. It is damn near perfection. It's like just an accepted idea at this point that Banjo-Kazooie was not only impactful at its time, but a clear example of a game that has survived the test of time. Everyone holds this game in super high regards as a game that not only helped define a genre, but an entire console generation. It's awesome. And then Banjo-Tooie happened and no one really talks about it all that much. You'd think with a game as celebrated as Banjo-Kazooie, the direct sequel would pop up in conversation a whole lot more, but yeah, no, that's not the case. It's not that people don't know about this game, but while people are able to go into these long, elaborate essays to explain how all the pieces fit together so beautifully in Kazooie, discussions about Tooie tend to focus on how the game is big, And that's about it. Well, to continue on my quest on exploring the entirety of Banjo's legacy, as well as justify the purchase of an Xbox One, let's take a look at the sequel to Banjo-Kazooie, Banjo-Tooie. The Xbox version this time around is a lot more required. I think a lot of people remember that Tooie is all about being bigger in scope, and this was all done at the cost of performance. Holy crap, the frame rate is so rough at times on the 64. It's a game that actually had widescreen support back in the day, which is pretty damn neat actually, but oof, for a good chunk of the game it feels like a slog. Just based on the smoother frame rate alone, the Xbox version is far and away the better way to play this game. And with the higher resolution, I can finally understand what I'm looking at here. This pixel sandwich on the N64 confused me for years. Also, I'm pretty sure that's a Game Boy camera. No amount of Nintendo to Microsoft rebranding is gonna change that one. That is a Game Boy camera, and all of its quote-unquote glory. Now, one of the best parts about Banjo-Tooie is that it feels like a genuine continuation of the previous game. So many sequels for platformers usually take place in brand new worlds with new stories and new villains, and oftentimes totally new mechanics. But not this one. Kazooie ended with Grunty falling off her castle and a giant boulder landed on top of her, need I remind you, killing her, and Tooie begins with her assistant Klungo, who had a super minor role last time, struggling to get the rock off her for the last 2 years since that first game. But we cut to a massive digging machine, the Hag 1, crashing through Spiral Mountain, manned by Grunty's sisters, Mingella and Blabelda. And thanks to an always reliable witch spell, they dispose of the rock, and with that, Grunty is saved. She's still dead, but not dead. You know how these things go. All the while, Banjo, Kazooie, Bottles, and Mumbo are enjoying a good old game of poker, and this is where some more of that awesome style that the first game had shines through. I really love how fluid these animations are. These are genuine cartoon characters. Oh, but no Tootie in sight though. Yeah, Banjo's sister is just MIA for this one. I wouldn't really blame her. Last time she really hung out with these guys, a witch kidnapped her, so I would leave too. As the drill is making its way through the mountain, it shakes things up pretty violently, and Mumbo goes to check things out. Unfortunately though, now without being spotted by the returning Grunty. So as you would expect, she makes chase. She pulls out a magical spell of her own and shoots it towards Banjo's house. Luckily though, all the characters that matter make their escape. I'm sure that's just a flesh wound. Not like they would actually kill off one of the main characters in the game before the adventure even begins. Oh man, the entirety of Spiral Mountain's been destroyed. It's all in tatters. Not even Grunty's own lair was safe from all of the attacks. As dark and grim as this is, it's actually pretty cool to start off in the same hub world as the first game after some time has passed. There are some extra areas to explore, and once you travel down the hole that the Hag 1 came down in and encounter Klungo for the first time, we run into the much more pleasant ILO Hags and the Jinjo village. On top of also having access to every single ability that we learned in the first game, this all adds to that feeling of this being a proper continuation rather than just another adventure. That's really cool. I also love the king of the Jinjos, King Jingling. This guy's a trip. What, the first game's ending had you think that the Jinjos are some sort of mythical beasts that are able to summon an almighty being of mass destruction? Pfft, nah man, that was all a fluke. They all just want to chill out and this guy's their leader. But don't get too attached though. One press of the suck button on the big old blaster zombifies our beloved king. This game's a whole lot darker than the last one. Luckily though, before his zombification, King Jingling instructed us on where to go next, and after one run through Bottle's house and refusing to tell his family the tragic news of his passing, nice guy Banjo over here, we run across the Shrine of Master Jiggy Wiggy. That's an amazing name. This is the new location to unlock levels, all by actually completing puzzles this time, which is pretty cool. It controls much better than that side game from Kazooie as well. But with that very first puzzle done, all of that story out of the way, the adventure can finally properly begin. I know that usually platformers don't really do much with its story, but credit where credit's due. Banjo-Tooie added a ton of lore to this world. It introduced a new premise with Grunty going out for revenge. It brought in a brand new world that's connected to the old one without feeling forced. There are plenty of incentives to see the adventure through all the way to the end. Good job, Rare. You did an awesome job with this one. But with all that being said, it's time to finally dive into the meat of the game, the actual gameplay. Oh boy. So at its core, Tooie is just more of Kazooie, but with a much larger scope. The worlds are absolutely massive this time around, with a half a dozen or so different sub-areas within each of them. And rather than being their own self-contained locations, now the entire universe of this game is interconnected. Whether it be from traveling on this huge train that you get access to a few levels in, or by finding hidden pathways scattered about, you can get to any single area in this game a handful of different ways. And that would just be one thing if it was an additional means of fast travel, but often some of the tasks that characters ask of you consist of performing actions in different levels. The prospector here in Glitter Gulch Mine wants his mouse partner back, who is held captive in Mayahem Temple. Gobi, the poor guy, can't catch a break, got himself imprisoned in Witchy World on his way to the Lava World, and upon freeing him and by using that aforementioned train, he actually gets to finally go to that Lava World he was talking about in the last game, on the fire side of Hailfire Peaks. My absolute favorite though, we have Mildred Ice Cube in the ice side of Hailfire Peaks. She lost her husband by way of a blizzard, sweeping him up away into the sky in Cloud Cuckoo Land. And after just one little push, you get to reconnect him back with this true love. Oh, JK, we kill him, but it's okay, now the water's not hot, so these little pigs in Jolly Roger's Lagoon can go for a swim. And on top of the returning moveset from Kazooie, Tooie is all about, once again, constantly adding to it with so many different moves and abilities. It is crazy. Now you can aim your eggs in first person, either while on the ground or while flying. There's different elemental eggs that you can use now with fire, ice, and explosive, as well as one that shoots out a tiny robotic bird that you can then control and explode on command. You can use Kazooie as a drill. For maneuverability, you can grab on ledges now and shimmy across them, and you're even able to split the duo up when you touch the appropriate pads. Aw, sick dude, that was totally worth an achievement. With this new ability, now both Banjo and Kazooie have their own unique set of solo moves. As you move forward throughout the adventure, it almost feels like three entirely different characters here, since each one is able to do things that the other configurations can't. And the feeling of constant growth is nice, but a lot of these are implemented to fix problems that shouldn't have been introduced in the first place. It's also pretty annoying at times being blocked out of a move just because you're not playing as the right configuration, requiring you to add quite a bit of backtracking into the mix. It is relatively easy getting back to that point with the appropriate character, but even then, it's still not ideal. Just not terrible. Oh yeah, and also Banjo can use Kazooie as a gun. This is so weird, man. I guess because Rare had success with GoldenEye and Perfect Dark, then why not do the same thing with Banjo? The oddest part about the entire thing, these segments are actually pretty fun. Never would I have thought that these two things coming together would have made a good fit, but color me surprised. They're not bad. This one mission really sucks, the time limit is super strict on it, but aside from that. Now I know the big question on your mind is who is giving you these moves if Bottles bit the big one. Introducing Bottles' brother, Drill Sergeant Jam Jars, who is not only your new teacher, but he also takes on this game's rhyming duties as well. Worlds also have proper boss fights now too. Yeah, Kazooie had some stronger enemy encounters here or there, but nothing that really felt like a proper battle aside from the final fight with Gruntilda. Here, every single stage has a big baddie to tango with, and with how wide the moveset is and the bosses sometimes taking full advantage of that, these are a much appreciated addition. I mean, Old King Cole is pretty dumb. He just wanders aimlessly while you pelt him with eggs. It's the worst fight in the game. But for the most part, these are a real highlight for the adventure. Mr. Patch, the strange, wobbly, inflatable thing. By far my favorite one. It's mainly for his awesome theme song, which is still so damn good. But this is the one fight that stuck out to me the most out of all of them. Well, aside from Lord Wu Fak Fak, just for the name. Now I wonder if I'm gonna be demonetized for saying that. Mumbo Jumbo has a starring playable role this time too. By collecting these magical creatures called Globos, you're able to toss them into Mumbo's little bag, where he can then harness that magic when standing on his specific pads. He can bring a giant stone golem to life for you to control and wreak havoc, add oxygen to water so you can swim without worrying about catching your breath, lift a rock. It's exciting stuff all around. Those Globos can also be given to this Native American stereotype, Humba Wumba, who now takes control over transforming Banjo into a new creature. There's a little stone Banjo that lets you talk to other stone creatures and take place in a kickball tournament. Always thought that was cute. An adorable roaring T-Rex that, with the power of Mumbo, you're able to play as in 2 different sizes. There's a TNT detonator where you can detonate TNT. There's a snowball. All right, some of these aren't that great. They all perform as expected, at least. There are plenty of things that you simply can't get to as Banjo or Kazooie, and that's where these transformations come in. And none of them are outright bad, but some of them are just not all that exciting. Although the bee from Click Clock Wood returns, it's a little weird though. Like, you guys didn't want to even try making an animation for this? So yeah, man, they really added a lot to this game. Just conceptually, Banjo-Tooie is far and away better than Kazooie. You got brand new moves, interconnected worlds, you got unique playstyles, pretty fun boss fights. There's a lot of cool stuff here. But it's when it all comes together that it starts to fall flat. There is one major issue that prevents this game from being greater than it should be: the backtracking. That's the main problem. Sure, the worlds are huge this time, but that isn't inherently a problem. Often you're restricted from progression towards a Jiggy because you just didn't have the needed ability. And that, coupled with areas not really having much in the way of interesting landmarks, when the time eventually comes to return, half the struggle is then finding just where exactly you need it to go. I've heard people have issue with how much darker the tone of the game is, from a more muted color palette used for the levels, and a less bouncy, more atmospheric soundtrack to accompany it, but that's all fine to me. That's not an excuse for making these locations so barren and a hassle to explore, especially when, sometimes, the clue to completing a level's task rests in another level. So unless mentally you're keeping on top of things at all times, it is very easy to get confused. Witchy World is the main exception to this in my opinion. Every area of this level feels different, so I never once struggled to complete it. The same goes for Cloud Cuckoo Land. Yeah, it's big, but the outside has so many interesting landmarks on them. Big cheese, a trash can, there are bees all the way at the top of the mountain. The majority of Jolly Roger's Lagoon is a massive, confusing underwater maze. Pterodactyl Land is just open and empty for the sake of it, just to make room for the big T-Rex, which only gets used a couple of times. And Grunty Industries. Oh man, Grunty Industries. This stage is multiple floors of dank, gray, uninteresting looking warehouse with doorways leading up and down and all around. I spent just over 3 hours getting everything in here. It felt like genuine insanity at times. The scope of things here does make the game feel like a much grander adventure for sure, but it's at the sacrifice of satisfying moment-to-moment gameplay. A lot of times you're just spent walking to a destination that you're not even sure if that's the right place to go, and sometimes the game just tells you to wait. Oh, fun. Luckily though, in the Xbox version, there is a brand new hint system that does help point you in the right direction. It doesn't fully alleviate the frustration though, you just get vague sentences that tell you what the objectives are. If this game got the full remake treatment and had an in-game map that you can have show up at all times, then it would probably be totally fixed. The number of collectible notes has been reduced as well. I was always of the mindset that they helped push the player to see every aspect of a level back in Kazooie, so here it's a bit tougher to do so when there are less of them in bigger areas. Yeah, the overall count is still at 100, but it's chopped up into 16 nests of 5 and 1 nest of 20. I guess it was to counter Donkey Kong 64 having 500 bananas per level, but in my opinion this is far too on the opposite side of the spectrum. Oh yeah, and also that lovely little Jiggy animation from the first game that was pretty iconic, completely gone now, which personally I'm still pretty upset about it. And actually, come to think of it, the talking items that explained what they did in Kazooie, that's gone too. Now everything is explained by jam jars. I mean, that's fine, it's not really a problem, but it does feel like they removed some of the charm on purpose without much substance to replace it with. Ultimately, all of these things combined lead to a less satisfying experience, which sucks because again, I think Tooie does so many things right, and it did have the potential to be way better than Kazooie. Like, when you know you're working towards something in this game and you can see the reward within arm's reach, it is pretty fun. And just based on the expanded moveset, simply controlling Banjo is much more enjoyable than last time. I just think Rare was too ambitious with this project, seeing just how much stuff they could fit into a single cartridge, which, to be fair, is something Rare was pretty known for back in the day. But I'll give the game this much: any sense of confusion or overload coming from the things that you can and can't do and all of the objects to collect, it's not as ridiculous as Donkey Kong 64, where that game had like a million things to collect and every button combination had a different thing that you can do. It was very confusing. Now that game was a nightmare. And with all the stuff that Tooie has going for it, there was even some content that didn't make it into the final product. This has been like one of my favorite things in the entirety of gaming for a long time now. Bottle's Revenge, a mode where a second player is able to play as the newly evil spirit of the recently deceased mole, where they can control enemies and try to fight the other player as Banjo. This is all thankfully still within the game's code, so it's nothing that some emulation can't solve. And on top of the massive single-player campaign, there's also a pretty substantial multiplayer mode, where many of the score-based challenges that are found within the main game can be played with multiple players, which is actually pretty fun. It may seem pretty forced given the genre of 3D platformer having just a ton of minigames like this, but considering how multiplayer-focused the N64 was, this makes perfect sense. And of course, then we have Stop and Swap. Time to finally talk about this can of worms. So this was a feature that was meant to transfer data between Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie by way of swapping out cartridges mid-playthrough, since early models of the N64 had 10 seconds of RAM that would maintain data despite the cartridge no longer being in the console. However, newer models of the 64 reduced that time to only 1 second, so for fear of, I'm assuming, kids breaking games and consoles on a regular basis, this had to be scrapped. The way it was meant to work was that there was a handful of colored eggs as well as an ice key hidden within Banjo-Kazooie that was teased in the game's ending. They are still accessible by entering in stupidly massive cheat codes in the N64 version, but they're also unlockable by having saved data from Banjo-Tooie on the Xbox version. So you go to the different hiding spots where these items are located, it plays a massive fanfare, makes it feel like it's a really big deal when you get them, and then with the eggs in tow, you're able to go back to Banjo-Tooie and find this brand new character, Heggy, and she will hatch them for you. I gotta say, after 10 plus years of anticipation, I am super excited to see what I get. Okay, you get one new close combat move. Okay, you don't really do close combat much anyway. Jinjo as a multiplayer character, homing eggs, an Xbox theme, a gamer pick. Alright, cool, man. This whole thing really paid off. At least with the ice key, if you find the massive safe, you gain access to a Mega Globo, which you bring to Humba Wumba's hut in the Isle o' Hags to transform Kazooie into a dragon. Dude, it's like super pointless. There's no time in the game whatsoever where blowing fire is useful in the slightest, but I don't care. This is still pretty awesome. It's certainly a better move than being able to abuse Kazooie at the push of a button. Some of those unlockables were still accessible in Banjo-Tooie on the 64 by finding and defeating the 3 of them spread throughout Spiral Mountain and the Jinjo Village. They originally would give you some of the colored Stop and Swap eggs, but now on Xbox you just get shiny eggs. That's it, nothing special. Jam Jars says, "Hey, good job," and that's about it. Okay, it's a really big letdown after so many years of mystery, but the whole idea of Stop and Swap is still such a super fascinating concept for me. For years, there was always this massive mystery surrounding these items that you could never get access to, but you can just see them. They're within arm's reach, but you can do nothing about it. It always led to really fun discussions talking about what could have been. And besides, a game rewarding you for playing previous games in the same series is something that I don't think is done enough in gaming nowadays. It's still something really cool. So if it wasn't obvious enough at this point, I am definitely in the camp of people who think that Kazooie is way better than Tooie. On individual things, Tooie does do things better, but on the whole, Kazooie is, like I said, that game is damn near perfect. It would have been really hard to top that game anyway. But one of the things that Tooie does do better than Kazooie is the ending. And this was a clever segue to talk about the ending. Once you finally get your hands on the appropriate amount of Jiggies and complete every puzzle that Jiggy Wiggy's shrine has to offer you, it is time to head to the tippy top of Isle o' Hags, Cauldron Keep. And I love this place. Gruntilda being out for revenge and retiring her rhyming ways makes her a bit more of a serious villain. The darker themes make for a more serious adventure. And finally reaching the top of a huge mountain after a long adventure makes for a more epic conclusion. Being reminded of the bad guy's existence a little bit more often would have been nice. You just fight Klungo a couple times and that's it, but overall, I'm a fan. There is another fun and wacky quiz segment, but instead of doing the over-the-top board game, it's a trivia fight to the death, and Grunty is not afraid to put her own sisters who saved her at risk. Yeah, it's not as charming as the Furnace of Fun, I guess, but I wasn't ever a huge fan of that anyway, so I like this. Mostly because we don't have to deal with any of that Brentilda garbage. That alone makes this way better. After getting through the game show safely, Grunty once again makes an escape while we let some credits roll by. Banjo is able to reverse the effects of the suck blow machine and bring bottles back to life, as well as unzombify King Jingling, and with the help of Dingpot, Grunty's old assistant, making a grand return. It's time for the final encounter against the evil witch in her giant drill tank. It's a good old-fashioned shoot-off too. This is a pretty fun final boss. There's plenty of obstacles to avoid and questions to answer, because why not? It's a much more engaging fight than the final boss of the first game in my opinion. But before long, she's toast anyway. We saw that coming. We killed her. Again. Banjo and friends celebrate their victory with a party at Bottle's place. The good guys kick around Grunty's head for a little bit, which was actually censored in Japan, cause I guess this was just too violent for you guys? She warns us of her impending return in Banjo 3, which still hasn't happened yet, and every time I say that out loud, it makes me sad. And that ends Banjo Tooie. And then Microsoft bought Rareware, and it's been a disaster ever since. But yeah, that's Banjo Tooie. Not a bad game, but it does feel like Rare developed it without really keeping in mind the stuff that made Banjo Kazooie so special in the first place. This game does have its fans, and if you're one of the people out there who do prefer this sequel to the original, more power to you. But I think as time goes on, the moment-to-moment gameplay of Banjo Kazooie, that tends to be the preferable option. Maybe a full-on remake that the likes of Crash, Spyro, and even SpongeBob got would make this adventure a lot more worthwhile in a modern-day setting, but who knows, time will tell on that one. With the extra little bit of time I have with you all, I want to take another look at Rare Replay. I want to take another look at a game from Rare's past. Last time we took a look at Attic Attack, and that was... yeah, we just went way too far back in Rare's timeline. How about we take a look at Saberwolf? You know, the main character from that game does show up in Banjo Tooie, so that character must have a great legacy if they wanted to put him into a Banjo game. Let's check it out. Nope.